All right. Today's ride is with the infamous Manny Faces.
Great googly moogly. This is peak moped right here, folks. Like, like you are going to love this. This is animated discussion that flows with ease, grace, humor, depth, intelligence. I'm done. This is the last podcast I'm ever going to do. No,
We
that's
can't
not
top
it.
this one.
That's not true. I definitely want to do more, but like it's that kind of feeling that I'm having right now. And Manny, man, whoa. Thank you for coming on the show.
Support Blast, Compton Cowboys. Hit us up, the host at mopedoutlaws.com. Subscribe, please, and enjoy this ride.
Sis, hallo?
Blijven.
Bist du sicher wegen dem?
Yo iets niet, joh.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Marc.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Moped Outlaws. You know, there are people who love a culture, and then there are people who devote themselves to listening deeply enough to become a steward of its wisdom. Today's guest is one of those people. Michael Manny Faces, Conforti, has spent years exploring hip hop not merely as entertainment, but as a way of seeing the world, a culture of reinvention, innovation, and human resilience. Through his journalism, podcasting, and now his book, Hip Hop Can Save America, Manny has become something of a bridge builder, helping us see how hip hop's spirit moves through education, healing, activism, technology, and the deeply human work of belonging. Manny, welcome to the Moped Outlaws.
Wow, what a nice intro. Thank you. What a pleasure to be here. I appreciate that. That you wrote a better intro than I write for myself, and I'm very conceited. So that's really great. Thank you.
We do our prep.
Yeah,
like it says, I'm all in. Let's do this.
Nicely done. Thank you. I appreciate
So
it.
before we get into the big ideas, who first made you feel like you belonged inside hip hop?
Oh gosh, hip hop. My friends, I grew up in New York City, right outside of New York City on Long Island, and I'm about the same age as hip hop. So we're all kind of, we're all somewhat the same age, I suppose, but coming up around like the same age of its explosion into the zeitgeist and being right outside of New York City. The earliest memories of, we'd hear the music and we would do things, but or we'd participate, we'd listen, but it became like a weekly thing, even in New York City where hip hop was, born and big. Even on black radio, you could only hear rap for a certain amount of time from like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Friday nights and Saturday nights. And that was it. They wouldn't play it during the week. It still wasn't, fully integrated into the mainstream. And so Friday nights was kind of our hangout. I'd go to my friend Craig's house and we'd be in the basement of Craig's house playing ColecoVision, right? I'm showing my age. And we'd listen to radio. We'd have our tapes and we'd record off the radio because then we'd want, listen to the cassettes during the week. And that sort of became a camaraderie, right? There was like four of us. It was Craig and Terry and Jason. We were all just hanging out. And that became sort of like the crew. And then from that, I got really into the music and found other people who were into it. And we found things to do together. And it just became sort of part of life, like in middle school, high school era. It just became part of what we did every day. Just like, you go play basketball and then we go home and listen to music, or I'd start DJing and making beats at some point. So it just became a part of life because we had a camaraderie, a fellowship, that emerged through the music and eventually like the cultural aspects of it as well.
Was there a moment where you were invited into another crew or some sort of scene where it made you feel welcome inside of hip hop culture in a way that what you just described hadn't yet?
I remember like writing a rhyme, and I was probably in 9th grade, and it's just a little short rhyme. It was, very Run DMC-ish, like around that time. It wasn't very complex, but it was cute. And, I was one of the only white guys, participating in this art form. And so the girls in the school were like, oh my God, come. And they dragged me by the arm and they, oh, you could rap. And he rap. And I'd rap for some of their girlfriends. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this
Girls.
this could be something. So I wouldn't say I was welcome into the crew, but I was welcome into, I was welcome into the, I was welcome over to that side of the lunch table.
That worked.
Yeah, it worked. But it was like that kind of idea. Like I could express myself. I could say a thing. I could do this. Right. And then what happens with hip hop, even to this day, is very welcoming. If you come with like sort of respect for the culture or the art form, I mean, this is a worldwide, it's developed, obviously started from, Black folks in the Bronx and Hispanic folks jumping in and working this thing together. But it's universal and it's worldwide. And I found that very early on and always sort of ascribed to that. Respect the architects, respect what it is, and participate honestly. And now you're in the cipher. Now you're in that circle. And it's always been like that for me.
Got it. What's a cipher?
So the cipher, as we refer to it, normally is seen as like y'all have seen this because like y'all watched the Olympics and there was breaking and they all kind of sat in a circle. Typically in rap or breaking, you'd have a circle of performers kind of all holding this space where one person would jump into the middle and perform and do their thing. The others would kind of watch, participate, clap along, whatever, hype them up. And then someone else would they'd kind of trade off spaces. And the real cool thing about a hip hop cipher is that Tony Blackman, who's a wonderful artist and MC herself and poet and author and mentor, and she actually trains people to do speaking engagements. Tony Blackman, she wrote a book called The Wisdom of the Cipher, and it kind of puts all of that, what we knew inherently by participating in a cipher, into like terms that folks can understand. So it's very communal. It's an exchange of knowledge. It's a iron sharpens iron moment where we can all kind of participate, be competitive, but not to the point where we're trying to win. We're just all trying to lift each other up together. And this could happen with rap. I've done it many times as a rapper. Dancer, I'm not so much of a dancer. I've done it even in DJ circles. And interestingly enough, that other element of hip hop that sometimes doesn't get talked about is knowledge. And so you could have a intellectual cipher. And so it's just that idea of, going back to the earliest days of humanity when we all sat in a circle and talked or shared ideas or, shared knowledge or passed down stories. And hip hop very much uses that as part of its artistic aesthetic.
Got it.
You're giving me a moment. Manny, I wonder if we go broad strokes.
Yeah.
So you're in this hip hop culture. Part of what I was impressed with what I've read is the level of academia in your communication, in your written word. Did you move into academics?
I am not an academic in the traditional sense. My dad was a distinguished professor of sociology. And so I, of course, then didn't go to college because, you know how that goes.
Surprises me because, again, your level of academia communication is like.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think he would appreciate that. He's passed on now, but I did get a lot from him, I think, through osmosis over the years. When he was very professorial, even in his rearing of me. And, if I got in trouble, there'd be an analogy to explain something, so I always got these ways of seeing the world. My dad was also my kind of entree into music, really. He was a blues and jazz connoisseur, grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Studied urban studies and sociology of minorities. So he was very knowledgeable about multiculturalism before, so I'm growing up I knew what gentrification meant when I was 8, like it was weird. So I picked up a lot, just throughout my life with him. And I got into journalism. I happen to be a pretty decent writer. And so I worked under some really great journalists. So I learned how to sort of do research and fact checking and telling the story. And so I think the combination of those two experiences, plus just being naturally brilliant, got me into a place and where I wanted to be able to be in those spaces. So where I was writing a blog for many years and I was covering as a music journalist, this is where all came from. I was covering hip hop in the New York area, and I was covering artists and showcases and events that were happening and such. But I started writing more editorializing, right? And just kind of giving my, analysis and opinions on things bigger than just the gossip or what artist is doing what, so some of the bigger picture stuff that I'm now talking about. And then I realized that to do that, you have to, that if you do that, you can then go to spaces where the academics are, because that's where the conferences are. And if you want to speak to your intellectual peers, that's where they are. So I had to learn how to put together a paper, present the paper at these things, which my dad did we used to go every year. That's like some conference. He's like, I'm going to present the paper. And I'm like, why does it take you 4 hours to just give them your paper? I don't understand. But he's speaking it, he's delivering it. And so I kind of mirrored in some ways myself after what I had seen him do, and learned to have longer form analyses. And so that kind of just brought all of these things, I guess, together in a way that I could write academically, but also hopefully accessibly. That's kind of my niche.
All right. So here's the question that's burning in my mind. Do you think it's a plausible scenario that America can be saved?
Well, it's plausible. And it depends. When I started the podcast, Hip Hop Can Save America, I was focused mainly on what I've seen it do, again, in ways outside of entertainment that most people even listening and, or talking to me for the first time would never even think about, areas like education and health and wellness and science and technology. Like, what are you talking about, Manny? And I recognized that what it was doing was it was correcting some disparities, right? If nothing else, if we all want to have an equal, education, if everyone in America should be educated to a certain level, and there's failures in that, I've seen hip hop do some things where it elevates certain kids in schools, educational output in ways that just weren't being done. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, there's a solution here to a problem that I don't think has been investigated purely enough. So on a very core level, if there's things that we want to change in a positive way, I can give you dozens of, and again, the people I interviewed on the podcast that are in the book, my own 2 cents, my own analysis, I can give you examples across many boards about how we can actually improve lives and livelihoods and communities through hip hop directly, not as a joke and not as a theoretical that have been done. There's receipts, there's research that shows it. Again, education, health and wellness, mental health therapy, improved in ways that we haven't seen other techniques do. So yes, I think we can help solve those disparities. As I say, I think hip hop can help address, alleviate, and in some cases eliminate some of the ills that we face as a society, not just America, the world. But that's predicated on the idea that everyone wants that. And I don't think that everyone does. So it becomes sort of the larger picture of a fight for equity and equality and justice. And people who obviously have, power and want to maintain it at the expense of others, that they're not going to be very happy about anything saving America, in that sense, saving it. So I don't know.
Well, it depends on how we define America, right? Defining America, I think through the lens of hip hop is, freedom to be the culture you want to be and to be able to rise according to your work, right? And breaking down a lot of the institutional racism, all of those things are what it looks like to heal America, right? Yeah. And without getting too far into this, there's this idea that America isn't just the 3D reality that we experience. It's an aspiration. It's a way of living that has codified into it this idea of self-determination, equal application of justice, freedom from or freedom to practice whatever your religion is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in the history of hip hop, as far as my awareness goes, there are 2 particular men who I think created a really powerful branch of what you're talking about. And that's RZA and KRS-One. They're very obvious to most people. I do not consider myself someone who's a hip hop educated person. I have a cursory intimacy with it. Sure. Who besides RZA and KRS-One are on the tip of edutainment, of raising cultural healing?
It's a great question. And I'm glad you pointed them out. Those are really, and again, your example or your understanding of what America is supposed to be, right? Living up to that ideal of true freedom and freedom of expression, all the things. Yes, I think that's inherent in what hip hop culture celebrates. again, past what people's perceptions might be. And we can give many examples. RZA, KRS on the artist side are great examples of, again, KRS-One's whole thing is, hip hop being a culture, and that there's all these different tenets, not just the original elements that we think of rapping and DJing and breaking and graffiti, but, entrepreneurialism and, street knowledge and fashion and, and all these other elements that hip hop has affected in some way, influenced in some way, for better mostly, and for worse sometimes, because humans. But what I've found is, and I don't want to downplay any of that, I think that those, and again, RZA's metaphysical outlook to everything. He's an amazing thinker, and has incorporated all of that into the music and the artistry. And I think that what the real advances or evolution of that kind of thinking from an artist perspective has now been where we see these intersections that I study, where it's folks who aren't necessarily artists, or sometimes they are. They could be practitioners as well, but they've gotten themselves into academic spaces, or they're in a position where they're, I don't know, a nonprofit leader, and they're working with young people in the community, and they recognize the same thing that KRS does and the same thing that RZA does. That hip hop, if you look at it as a culture of peace, love, unity, and having fun, which we often, refer to when we talk about hip hop, those tenets that Afrika Bambaataa, the late Afrika Bambaataa now, who was problematic in several other ways, still created this idea of this is actually what this culture is about: peace, love, unity, and safely having fun. That's actually at the core of hip hop. So if it's not one of those things, it's something else that maybe have some of the DNA, but it's sort of a mutant version of it. It's the core of hip hop. So if you look at peace, love, unity, and having fun, what forwards that, or what advances that when you use the music and or the culture? And that's where my friends come into play, where they are educators, or they started using it in the classroom. They were hip hop heads, and they started, bringing in, but they became teachers. And so they became, they found ways to bring their culture into the classroom instead of leaving it at the door, which a lot of, institutional spaces say, you can't come in here with that. That's not part of what we're doing here. That's not that you're making all this noise and you're doing, no. It's just part of my understanding of the world and how I see the world, a part of my culture, and why would I leave it at the door? So they said, well, no, we're going to welcome that in, and let's see what happens if we use that as sort of a pedagogical tool, or just a way to make kids feel more comfortable in the classroom, instead of feeling like you're in, mini jail or whatever it is. Schools are kind of very institutional spaces. And I think that's where I think, clearly that's where I think the genius is, in taking the music and the culture and finding ways to incorporate it into these other areas. And the ones who do that are generally the more unsung heroes of hip hop culture. They're not, you don't hear about them. They aren't the KRS ones. They're the, Marc Lamont Hill wrote one of the first books about using hip hop in the classroom. Dr. Chris Emden, who has a whole hip hop ed movement. As a matter of fact, there's a conference in early June in New York City that I'll be at, that they do every year, and it's a collection of educators that are doing that. Dr. Lauren Kelly, who I work with at Rutgers University, who has a whole conference called the Hip Hop Youth Research and Activism Conference, which invites young people, like college students, young people, to run the conference and decide how hip hop should be presented and looked at from a research and activism point of view. That's using the music, that's using the culture, that's having young people, giving them agency, acting as mentors, and never losing our roots to the music and culture, so that it's authentic and creative and doesn't get overtaken by, what industry has decided that hip hop is. And so those are the people that I like to highlight and tell the stories of, and then sort of, in my role here, being sort of an expert of experts, that talked about all of this work from a holistic level. So yes, the artists you mentioned, and many others. There's an artist named No Name. She's out of Chicago, had some great, sort of politically charged and brilliant work. Opened up a bookstore, an abolitionist bookstore in Chicago, right? Does a book club, where she brings other artists in, and they're talking about these books of, progressive politics, or social change
from within.
100%. Vic Mensa, who was a rapper, but a lot of people know him now because he plucks oranges off of his orange tree on Instagram
Right.
and TikTok, and he'll give you some brilliant socioeconomic breakdowns with charisma and charm. But people don't know he's a rapper. He's been rapping.
That's
about
not
this for
even.
years.
Yeah, you have no idea he's into hip hop except if you look at his t-shirts or you like go, pool,
Yeah.
Florida, oranges. Like he's doing pretty well for himself.
I mean, I think he's going to run out of oranges, but yeah. I think he has another tree. He has like a backup. I don't know how California works, but I will say this. That's my point, is that he's no less hip hop just because he's giving you verbal commentary and not rapping a song. He's still hip hop. That's still hip hop.
So let me
ask
you a question.
Yeah.
Is Cornel West hip hop?
It's my guy, man. He endorsed my book. He better be.
That's why I asked, right? It's like,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because people who look like me might not understand the level at which hip hop culture is academic. It is high level experiential wisdom. It's not just bouncing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the way you see the world. It's the way you analyze the world. And again, as a son of a professor, like I know that you analyze the world through culture. Culture is a tool for that.
You know, this recent Kevin Hart roast that just went down, I've been hearing a lot since that happened about the culture and people debating about whether the culture was protected. And it's the first time I've heard it so adamantly and at the forefront of conversation, the culture, which I understand it. Well, can you give me some insight of what is being talked about when?
Yeah. You could ask a bunch of people and you'll get a bunch of answers. When you're talking about black folk will be best to answer that question than me. But because again, it's an interesting turn of phrase these days, because in hip hop, we will refer to the culture, right? The culture of hip hop. And again, that could be the more traditional purist understanding of that, the 5 elements, the tenets that I just spoke about. And that anything that deviates from that that's not the culture. That's not the real culture, right?
Do you think Andre 3000 challenged the culture when he came out with his recent Flute album?
I think that sparked an interesting way of looking at what the culture, what defines the culture. And I don't think that there's obviously it's such a personal kind of thing. Like what hip hop culture means to me may not mean what it, may not be the same to someone else. So it's hard to, and again, hip hop itself is as I've always said, it's very hard to put something in a box that's inherently not supposed to be in a box. It's literally boxless. Yeah. So having these conversations, I don't think there's an answer at the end, a definitive statement. That's why academics has a limit. Like we can't define it as in a paragraph and say this is Black culture, this is Black American culture, this is African diasporic culture. Like what's the culture? Like there is no the culture. It's like saying the media. It's like, oh, the media's garbage. I'm like, yeah.
Not this show.
Right. That's what I'm saying. We're media. So it becomes a phrase that you can use for your own purpose, right? For your own agenda. Like, again, you'll hear Trump saying, the fake news media. And it's like, but the real news media isn't it all fake news media? Like, what's the media? Is social media the media? Is only journalism the media? Is journalism even journalism anymore? So we've gotten into a weird place with terminology. I guess overall, there are always going to be concerns, particularly within Black community, and really honestly any non-white heterocentric male group of people, that the narrative is going to be controlled by others who don't have that community's best interest at heart. And I think the debate over comedy and roast and Kevin Hart and whether I saw a thing today, because the big thing was like, well, Kevin Hart sold out for the and then someone said, I saw a meme today. It was like, Kevin Hart didn't sell out. He never bought in. I was like, oh, that's deep. Oh, now okay. So there's critique here. And then there's people obviously from a very, comedy is the way we manage everything, our lives and what we see and how we look at things. And even horrific jokes are there for some kind of, reasoning behind it. So I get all the points. my stance on it is a little bit neutral. As a journalist, sometimes I get to hide behind, well, I just want to hear what everyone else says, and I'll editorialize when I feel, like compelled to. And that's not my, like I said, that conversation is not my fight, but it does point to a larger idea of culture as a weaponization tool, I guess, in some ways. Like you would say, well, there's MAGA culture, you know what I mean? And there's, and there's Republican culture and there's conservative, all these cultures. The culture is supposed to be like everybody, but I see where people are taking pockets of it. And I try to be nuanced about it. And I try to understand, most sides of the issue and see where everyone's coming from. I used to run in comedy circles. I know a lot of comedians. who are just like, yeah, bugging. It's a roast, man. It's how it goes. But I work in social justice circles where it's like, anytime the narrative is used to, continuously downplay us or let somebody come in, and insult us, kind of on our stage, like, what are we doing? Why are we still letting, white people come in here and have their way with us like that? I see both sides of it.
I think there's a through line in rap battles. And there's an element of when you're in a cipher where there's a battle, there's a moment where the roast occurs, right? That's part of that framework. And so the funnier the roast, as opposed to the meaner the roast, the better the score. And no one's like actually going, I'd give him a 10. It's just like the vibe, right? It's like, so humor as it relates to the cipher battle or the rap battle plays a powerful part, and it is somewhat roasting because it's geared towards saying, look, you don't have the vibe, sorry, right? Like, why don't you open your chiclets? It's time to stop. Like, right. And so then here's where I'm going to stretch the definition.
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle does not perform rhythmic cadences that have rhyming schemes to them. But I think of him as within the framework of hip hop culture because of the way he speaks truth to power and the way he uses language to bring us to this uncomfortable self-awareness of the conditions we're all in. So am I stretching it too far?
I think that a lot of people would agree with that. I think a lot of people would say, he said, is Cornel West hip hop? Like Cornel West don't rap, but he be rapping, but he doesn't, but he comes from sort of that kind of mindset. There's a book Toby Jenkins wrote called The Hip Hop Mindset. And there's sort of that way of seeing the world influenced by what many different things have influenced Cornel West, for example, or Dave Chappelle. I mean, Dave Chappelle was influenced, no doubt, by George Carlin, who wasn't hip hop. There was no hip hop when George Carlin was, in his heyday, whatever. But the idea of hip hop being sort of the ultimate remix culture, right? You pull from all these different sources, you remix it all together, you sample from all these different things, you put it all together, and you have this really unique way of expressing and relating to the world and seeing the world. This is what we try to get. Like, we see the world differently, like hip hop heads, because we're always in that remix mentality. We're always not supposed to do this thing. Remember they said rap. I said rap wouldn't be on except till 10 o'clock, at night on a Friday and Saturday. But then we had college radio shows that were like, well, we'll play rap, Wednesday night for 5 hours from midnight to 5 in the morning. Right. I was on Long Island. So Adelphi, where Chuck D and them were, or Columbia with Stretch and Bobito. Like, they were like, we'll do it anyway. And so we always said, well, you don't want to give us a record deal? We'll make mixtapes. Like, it's always this way of like finding a way around so I think that people like Dave and people like Dr. West and, people who have this mentality, it's an extension of Black Americans having to be resilient and obviously work, around the edges the whole time and come and find their own way when being oppressed and blocked and shut down and shut out, so that's where it comes from. But the fact that anyone with good intention can participate in that same kind of mindset. So I see Dave Chappelle being very influenced by hip hop's remix mentality, resilience, truth to power, F the police, like everything that, hip hop's always been about. It's that ultimate protest form, and it may take form in rap, and it may take form in DJing, it may take form in dance. I mean, people don't talk about, like, I talked to my good friend Aisha Upchurch. By the way, I'm naming like 30 names. The whole point is that, you know, follow these rabbit holes. Aisha Upchurch, who used to teach at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, is now in Texas at one of the Texas's universities, Texas State of Texas. I don't know. But she's a dance teacher. She's a dancer. And she will tell you about the liberatory, you know, dance is liberation, dance is joy, especially for Black people in America. And that's something else we see in hip hop. So it doesn't have to look like rap music to be hip hop. It doesn't have to be one of the 5 elements to be hip hop, but it does have to have that mentality, as Grandmaster Caz from the Cold Crush Brothers says in a great documentary, by the way, called The Art of Rap. If you want to get a little bit deeper into how rappers rap, it's a good thing. Ice-T produced it. It was a bunch of years ago, but it's a great documentary. And in it, he says, you know, hip hop didn't invent anything, but hip hop reinvented everything.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of idea where if you live by that kind of way of seeing the world, you are wanting the best for everybody. You do know what the cipher is supposed to be. It could be competitive. We could beat each other. Even in the rap battles, like the battle rap scene, where it's not a cipher, it's a one-on-one, and they will say the most dastardly. If you think a roast was bad, listen to like, you know, listen to like the rap battle leagues. But at the same time, it's still like, nah, this is steel sharpens steel. We're not here to like embarrass or you know, it's just a different feeling. And I feel like it's almost like maybe the roast situation came in feeling like, oh, y'all do it like this, we could do that too, right? And it's like, no, you can't. You know what I mean? And not because it's a white black thing. It's just because the thing is like you're overstepping the boundaries a little bit of what that cipher mentality should be. And in hip hop, I think we're more conscious of that, and so we look for it.
I don't know the gentleman's name, but there's a gentleman rapper who talked about his, like in the early days, a battle he had with M, and M used the N-word, and this gentleman saying like, that's when I realized it's not racist if it's clever. Because if M had been off, if he hadn't hit the mark, there would have been trouble. But because he was so clever in the way he came at me, I was like, oh, all props. All, you know.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, and again, that's one, because then someone else might not have had the same response.
All right. So that area you just spoke of, I think is at the heart of what we're all experiencing here in America, where like you, Manny, could be like, that's a hard yes. And me, Greg, could be, that's a fuck no.
Yeah.
How do we come together with such energetic opposition and come into the cipher?
I mean, well, thank you. That's great. Again, I named the book Hip Hop Save America, but then the subtitle is Inspiration for the Nation from a Culture of Innovation, right? Not solutions, because I don't know. I don't fucking know. But yeah, I see some of this in the work that I do or that I talk about, because, so for example, there's this longstanding back and forth about generational, divides, right? And this happens across all just generations, right?
Yeah.
But in hip hop, like they're like, oh, you don't understand. Like hip hop is this beautiful thing, as you hear me wax poetic about it. But young people don't see it that way. They only see the commercial side. They only see the fact that it's music or music making, and they or they want to party to it, or they want to make it, and they want to be famous, or they want to be on TikTok, whatever. And we generally hate that as older folk, because we're like, that's not what this is all about. And I make this analogy a lot. I say, especially as older rap fans, you will hear people say, we used to rap about selling drugs, man. All these kids rap about is taking drugs, like they're so weak. Like, and I'm like, as if the first was better. Like, what
right.
You're saying that? But the implication there, and I get it, is that, it was a harder life back then. Like, we were in the crack era. We were like in these, things hadn't progressed to this level. Whereas
as if the fentanyl era is like no big deal.
Of course, right. So that gets overlooked, A, right? And then B, I think the idea is that, the kids are soft because they're rapping about self-medicating, or they're rapping about, like Juice WRLD's Lucid Dreams, not a rap song, but certainly rap adjacent. And self-medicating and sipping lean and, just getting Molly Percocets and all these things. And that's all they rap about now. And I always say, well, listen, I may not like the music styles. Obviously, we're older. We're not going to, it's going to evolve. We're not going to like it. But if my kid is listening to an artist and relating to them because they're talking about depression and self-medicating, then instead of just like criticizing my kid's taste in music, I might want to ask my kid what's wrong. You know what I mean? I might want to say, hey, we should go to therapy. We should get instead of being like, that shit is whack, I'm going back to listen to my CDs. Like, what am I doing as a parent, right?
Right.
So we have a way, even though we're on totally different sides of we, and I'm speaking the royal we of like hip hop. I'm a little bit more, I've had kids of different ages, so I've stayed very relevant, but a lot of times we don't, and life gets in the way, and I get it. But we despise what our kids are tuned into, and then we tune out of our kids, right? So when I look at the mental health practitioners who are older, not ex-hip-hop heads, but older hip-hop heads, they don't like what the kids are listening to, but they recognize that here's a common ground. Here's a way that we could talk to each other. And if you're listening to this music that's saying something to you, I want to know, like, why? What is it? What are you related to? Why does this mean something to you? Why is it so negative, but you feel negative, and now you feel some camaraderie with that? And the mental health of it, the school counselor, Dr. Ian Levy, who's in the book, talks about he built a recording studio in the school. And so after like years of like fighting against the school, like they were like, well, do it after school. He was like, all right. And then, or, do it during lunch. He was like, who wants to come to like lunch and talk to their counselor? But he got them to set up this program where young people would come in. And I have a TEDx talk. I talk about it there too. It says young people who don't, especially men, in like rough and tumble areas, they're not vulnerable. They don't want to talk about their greatest fears and their traumas. They're going to be sitting back like this bullshit. What is this bullshit, right? I'm not talking about this. But if they feel comfortable with you and there's a beat machine and a microphone, maybe they'll start writing about it. And he developed this program where they did just that. And not only were more comfortable speaking there, because he's a white dude. His name is Ian Levy, for God's sakes, right? But he raps. He also raps. He's from New York. Like every white boy raps in New York. It was New York. But, at our age, but he says, no, I rap too. Like, and they're like, no, you don't rap, Dr. Levy. And he does a little something, respects where they're coming from. It's a meet me where they are kind of thing. And then they feel more comfortable. And now they're writing songs about, and he tells the story in the book where it was like during the spate of police brutality, Freddie Gray and Michael Brown and, all these things. And so that was kind of on there, Trayvon Martin with the hoodie. And so they all wrote, so they weren't just talking to him more comfortably, they were talking with each other, which never happens. You don't get a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds talking about trauma to one another, being vulnerable to one another. So to me, like, that's a miracle. You can't, how do you get these kids to talk to each other? So it's those examples of saying, even I was in a place outside of Myrtle Beach, and it's called Murrell's Inlet. Murrell's, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like Murrell's Inlet, South Carolina, right? And it's a beautiful place. There's a bunch of restaurants, and and there's like water, and it's fun. I was there with my family, and let me tell you, I was the farthest from hip hop that I could possibly have been at that moment in that time. The band is playing Sweet Home Alabama, right? Like, we're out there, like, it's fine, it's great, but it's not like nowhere near hip hop. And I go to the bathroom, and I'm passing the band, and they're playing, whatever. And I look up above, and in a like chalkboard thing on the little sign, it says, "We Them Boys, Benjamin Franklin, 1776." And I'm like, that's so stupid. That's so stupid, because "We Them Boys" is a hip hop reference, and it's attributing it to Ben Franklin and the Revolution. I don't know, whatever. And I don't know if it's mockery or just a joke or whatever. But in that place was hip hop. So what I say is, there is nobody in America who's not touched by hip hop in some way. You don't have to like it. You don't have to love it. You don't have to be part of it, but you know it. And there are ways that I'm watching these folks connect to people, and it doesn't even have to be hip hop. If you got young people who don't listen to a lick of hip hop, country music, use the same techniques that we're using with the hip hop kids and use it with the country kids. I was in Connecticut and a bunch of these kids in Connecticut, they listen to country music. I'm like, Connecticut? We're in Connecticut? We're in the tri-state area and y'all don't listen to hip hop. You're listening to country music? Fine, no problem. We can connect with them the same way because we're using music as a way to connect with young people. And so I don't know what the original question was, but the idea of reaching people, yeah, that was it, across these divides. The last example I'll give you, they're in the book also. There's a bluegrass and a rap band called Gangsta Grass. Now, I don't know if you've heard of them. Now, bluegrass and rap is something that could go either way. On paper, I don't know about that. And I get it. We've had Brad Paisley and LL Cool J do a song, "Accidental Racist," which was purposefully horrible. It was accidentally terrible, and did nothing right. But Gangsta Grass is different. Bunch of bluegrass musicians, super good bluegrass musicians. Like, actually, it's not just slapping two genres together and see what happens. These are cream of the crop. The band leader's name is Wrench. He's been involved in social justice stuff, right? But I mean, can pen a song. They got the banjos, the fiddles. They're kicking there. I don't know that much about bluegrass, but I'm like, that's good bluegrass. I don't know, but I could tell. Then you have these two rappers, Our Son and Dolio, out of Philly, like real rappers, real spitters, right? They spit. They're not just like corporate rap. They're not just like, no, not bluegrass rappers. They're rappers, right? You put them together with mutual respect for each other's craft and say, we want to have the best bluegrass and the best rap. And we're going to put these songs together. And what we're actually going to do is do social justice oriented songs. And then we're going to go to the Bluegrass Festival. And we're going to sing them in front of all the people that probably would never hear two rappers ever saying this type of stuff. And I'm like, ooh, that could go either way.
Yeah.
But if you, and let them tell you, don't listen to me. They'll be like, listen, I'm not saying that people walk in racist and walk out enlightened. It doesn't happen like that. He goes, but we're able to get in front of these folks who have never heard some of the perspectives that we're delivering them. They'd never listen to a rap song. They probably wouldn't listen to a black person talking like at a rally, at a lecture. They're not going to cross paths. He says, but we're finding ways to get this message into their lives. And he says, in all the times that they've done bluegrass festivals, they've gone around the world. They perform with the top tier. They're pretty, well, no, they were on America's Got Talent. They're pretty dope. And he goes, there was like one guy once who was like, nope, I'm out of here. And other than that, people came together and like, it's just a way that it shows that people who are absolutely guarantee you on opposite sides of those fences for a moment are in the same place. And I want to build off of that. That's all I'm saying.
So there's this element of Fred Hampton that showed up in what you just described, because one of the things that Fred Hampton did was he reached out to the culture of white people who were also oppressed economically.
Yeah.
And what that did was elevate the Black Panther Party's power, because it transcended just the limitations of that color barrier. And when all of oppressed peoples start to unite against the oppressors, it changes things. So this is an example with this bluegrass rap or rapgrass or blue hop, whatever you want to call it. It brings in this opportunity for people who recognize their mutual dissatisfaction with being left out of the spoils of capitalism and the things that we're doing. And that, to me, really, I'm fascinated to hear this story. And it just reminds me of this idea of if we all come together. And that's the thing about what you said, bringing people into the cipher. Hip hop has initially, it wasn't for everyone in a certain way. And in some ways, there's parts of hip hop that aren't for everyone.
Right.
But we've reached a level now where it does break down demographic barriers, economic barriers, racial barriers, and all these things. There's a name that I wanted to bring into the conversation because it hasn't come in yet.
Okay.
And so I just want to ask you open-ended, where does Kendrick Lamar sit in all of this?
Well, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner.
He's a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Right?
Pulitzer Prize
There's an
winner.
element of sophistication here.
Yeah, I think that, he's sort of in the lineage of, griots, right? And storytellers and analysts and, the evolution of what Tupac was, trying to do, and maybe would have elevated too. Kendrick Lamar's a really smart and insightful artist, and he's using his artistry in ways, not just rapping, but I mean, if you look at, you know, his shows and the Super Bowl performance, and, you know, taking all of the different parts, even the Drake battle was like an extension of his critique of capitalism, of people who, you know, basically just use that as their vehicle and don't necessarily. Now and people can criticize Kendrick Lamar in some ways because no one's perfect, everyone's flawed, but I think he's he's certainly the poster child, for, you know, lack of a better term, for, you know, the, I don't know, modern politically conscious, socially conscious rap artist. I do say, you know, there's only one Kendrick Lamar, but there are many Kendrick Lamars. Yeah. I mean, or folks along those lines. And what I push back against, only when we exalt Kendrick as we should, but to also remind people that he's not a one of one, in that there are other people that do that. Like, we say, finally, someone's talking, you know, rapping like this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, we could point to, you know, I could point to, you know, obviously you could point to like people like Immortal Technique, who've been rapping like this forever. You know,
Gil Scott Heron.
I mean, right. It's not like, but I mean, even I'm saying specifically in the rap world, like people think that kind of rapping doesn't happen anymore.
Well,
right?
Nas in the Ghetto, right? Wasn't that one of?
I mean, Nas has done a bunch of songs where he's you know, had that stuff. There are artists that are dedicated. I mean, Killer Mike has done stuff. We have, you know, even in Run the Jewels, and even by himself, we have again, No Name. You know, Rock starts. I'm purposely naming women. Rock has done stuff. There's a great group called The Reminders. There's so many like politically tinged or socio-conscious, again, Vic Mensa, you know, before he was plucking oranges. My guy Silent Night, who works with me on a podcast that we did called Newsbeat, where we were reporting on stories about social injustice, and then we were inviting rappers to pen 3 16-bar verses about that issue for that podcast.
Wow.
So every podcast had it like basically its own song, right? I mean the movement to close youth prisons, COVID disparities, the Me Too movement behind prison, murdered, missing, and indigenous women and girls. We had people rap about these things while we were interviewing activists and people going through injustice. Like, we didn't get no Pulitzer, we should have, but we did beat, I don't know if you heard of these people, the New York Times.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Fake news, right?
Yeah. The media. We beat them for Journalism Podcast of the Year.
Wow, congratulations.
Twice. So when I say Kendrick Lamar is like, yes, you know, on the world stage, he's a great ambassador for deep thinking through rap and, you know, and political, socio, you know, economic, you know, upliftment of Black people, for sure. Just like Mos Def Yasin Bey was, you know, singing songs like that. And Talib Kweli's been doing that kind of work. So yes, but my bigger plea is that if you like Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, because he's often lumped in, like, yeah, those are the guys now. Just understand, I just gave you 15 more names of artists you'd probably like to, and you should probably check them out as well, and not just wait for, you know, Kendrick Lamar to drop something new. So I think he's made it more. I think he's given hope to people that have been jaded by hip hop's, you know, ultra capitalistic and co-opted nature, to say, ooh, we still got rappers that do that. And I'm like, yes. And we have so many more. Well, so don't give up hope.
And I think that's just in the realm of creativity, is there are so many creatives that are magnanimous in their ability, but only a few create careers out of it.
Right. And you know what? And I say this about Kendrick Lamar, because people in hip hop especially, but I would say, I mean, even Questlove did this. I do a whole talk about social justice in hip hop, like a big keynote. And I mentioned this thing where Kendrick Lamar even came out once. Questlove even came out once. And it was after Michael Brown had been killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri. And a few months later, and he was like lamenting the fact that, you know, the protest music, like, we don't have enough people doing this kind of music. And, you know, we should, he says, you know, not everyone has to be fight the power, you know, but we need new Dylans and new Nina Simones, and we need new, you know, Chuck D's. And a lot of people agreed with that. They were like, yeah, especially in hip hop, man, we don't do that anymore. Hip hop is just, you know, it's bullshit now. It's all about the money and the da-da-da. The problem with that statement, I pointed out, that Questlove made, was that in this 4 months between the killing and his statement, I counted like 8 songs that had come out by like artists that we know, like Run the Jewels did a song, and T.I. did a song, and Rick Ross and Diddy at the time, we didn't know, did the song, you know, where the proceeds went to his memorial fund, though, right? And Tink and Alicia Keys, not hip hop, but certainly hip hop adjacent, did a song. And De La Soul featuring Chuck D from the old Public Enemy did a song. And so the impression is that we don't do protest music anymore. And I'm saying, no, we do. Y'all just don't like look for it. And even Kendrick Lamar, as popular as he was, with I Love Myself, what a great uplifting song, right? And then of course, We Gonna Be All Right, which was basically the theme or the anthem to the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. Them songs were on the radio for like 2.5 minutes, and then they were gone. As popular and as big and as impressive as he is, even he couldn't have songs on the radio. So we don't. So when we look for like hip hop to be a force for protest and for stop looking for music, because even he couldn't be on the radio, and you're not looking for music that uplifts these movements. So in my regard, yes, that's great, but it's also not where we can make the most progress, the most impact in the ways I'm talking about hip hop, and these other ways in political awakening, in educational spaces and mental health spaces can do way more than protest music can. So in this day and age where protest music doesn't have the same urgency or effectiveness as it did in the 60s, which is what we all harken back to. And so I'm just saying hip hop could do way more than just protest music if we're talking about social change. And I want people to know that, even with the Kendricks out there doing good work.
Well, and there's this history of the owners of mechanical record distribution, like radio stations, record labels, who are exercising economic oppression by making sure that they confine the genre to a kind of identity, and they don't let a lot of that other stuff through. But over time, more and more artists who have this ethos you're talking about have created resources that are outside of that domain. And 100%. There's a thing that, because of where I sit and who I am and what I listen to, I have no idea that it's happening, right? So what can you describe some of the people that have built the machinery that has the recording, the distribution, all of that material, and then have distributed it through what we might call secondary channels, but are really primary channels for this kind of hip hop consciousness we're talking about right now?
I mean, that's interesting. I don't know that anyone's, who can I think of that's like done it to like some great extent. I think that just the idea of that we can go direct to consumer now, has been an advantage. And I know that the internet is and being, on Spotify and all these things is like a blessing and a curse. I tend to look at the maybe I haven't studied it enough. The fact of getting material out directly to someone. Because again, you can go direct to consumer. You can go on Bandcamp, and you can be on Bandcamp, and that's sort of a nice revenue thing for you. It's not sort of as corporate controlled as anyone else. I know a guy named Kane Mayfield who sells. He incorporates a lot of Web3 technology into his stuff. So you could buy his album directly from him, and then you open it up and there's a QR code that now, is like a VR kind of, lands. So people are doing some really creative stuff that there is no middleman. There's no industry. It's just them, doing it. And I think Web3 has some stuff along those lines. What I look for, though, I guess, is like the no name with the bookstore. The Vic Mensa with the social media commentary. My friend Silent Night, who we worked with on the Newsbeat podcast, we did an episode about being exonerated after being in jail for decades and not getting any compensation from the government that put you there, and having to fight for that. It's a great episode. We worked with the Innocence Project on that. Well, they then loved his verses so much, our production and his verses so much, that they asked him to be an Innocence Project ambassador. So Innocence Project has a bunch of celebrity ambassadors. Stephen Colbert is one. John Batiste is one, right? These amazing like celebrities that go out and help preach the gospel of the Innocence Project, which is a great organization and works really hard to get these folks exonerated. But he's not famous. He's just, he's famous. He's famous to me. Silent Night, you're famous to me. I mean, he has a following. He's been making music.
He's not
for 20
famous
years.
yet.
He used to be on Raucous Records before they folded, so he's not insignificant. He's done songs with Inspector Deck from Wu-Tang. Like he's a really successful, long-time independent artist that kind of lives off of his music and some other things. But now he's an Innocence Project ambassador, and he's worked with them. And we did a show. We put together a show with them. We had some exonerees come, and we raised money. So I think that yes, you can create direct-to-consumer channels to sell your wares, right? And you can use Spotify and social media as a way to bring people into your funnel so that you can then, directly engage with them. And I think that more artists are figuring out how to do that, and that's great. But I'm really excited about how to then take their artistry and apply it in these other ways. The last one I'll give is Dr. Adia Winfrey, who I talk about a lot. She's been on the show. She's a psychologist, wasn't even a rapper, although she rapped. I remember she did like some rappy thing. It was cool. But she was a psychologist. She was known as like the hip hop psychologist. And she, again, wasn't rapping, but she had a hip hop mentality, and she used that in her psychology and how she related with patients and such. And then she ran for Congress in Alabama and Ruby Red part of Alabama and lost. And then I think ran again and came pretty close. Did pretty well, all things considered, right? And then decided to start an organization called Transform Alabama, which uses this ethos we're talking about to help fight against the redistricting that was happening in Alabama, which is now back in the news right now in the Supreme Court over the last 2 days. Well, I talked to her like 2 years ago. They started that fight. They helped bring the original legislation and pass it originally. They were one of the coalition organizations. And she threw concerts, and she had community events and maybe a barbecue. She runs a intergenerational hip hop political summit every year at the Selma Jubilee. So commemorating the Selma massacre. But this is her vibe. She's out there in the streets. She uses hip hop as sort of her vehicle. And to me, like, that's such an amazing way of directly communicating with the public, getting artists on stage who might not be able to break through the algorithms, but are kicking this kind of musical, vibes. And so I look at all these different things that are happening, and I'm saying that's where that remix mentality, that's just so effective and different that I'd like to see so much more of that than just worry about like, how do I, sell my records better? Like, I think it's more than that.
I think, I've been, one of my favorite blow my mind experiences was when LL Cool J did the Unplugged on MTV, and he had like the drum kit and a space. I was like, oh shit. Cause everything I knew before that was 2 turntables, know, and I was like, oh damn, this is working. And when I'm hearing you talk, I could just imagine like a symphony, an opera, a hip hop mix, that where these elder white people predominantly, like that class of people who have this idea of what hip hop is, but it's hearsay, could go in and experience that mixed up culture you're talking about.
All of those things happen. There's a hip hop orchestra, a guy named The Phantom, and he has a thing called the Ilharmonic, and he's been doing stuff. I've interviewed him. He's gone around the world. There's definitely been hip hop opera. People look at Hamilton as an example. That's true. And Hamilton, point. And that was like the breakthrough of that. But I like to remind people that there was hip hop theater before Hamilton. There was hip hop theater after Hamilton, and Hamilton's not exactly 100% hip hop theater. So but yes, as an opening to that, to put people onto that and say, listen, and hip hop's stubborn, and black people are very smart to say, we don't need or want your validation. We're gonna do our thing regardless. But if you check out what we're doing and you fuck with it, then number one, great, come through, buy our tickets, fund our organizations. Y'all got money. You're funding ballet, might as well fund us.
Right. Well, that's what, and we're talking about healing, right? And healing culture. And do you think Nardwuar helped open people's minds that may not have been open to the hip hop culture?
I hope so. And that was great. What a treasure. I'm over here. There's a spider web.
Yeah, that's all good.
I was gone for a week.
Casting spells. I see you. You're casting spells.
Nardwuar. It sounds like Nardwuar. It sounds like a spell.
Sounds like Harry Potter gone.
Yeah. I'd like to think so. I think that's, and again, with, you know, I think of his interviews and his style as being like how Stephen Colbert used to do, you know what I mean? Like his whole character, you know, but it makes it so that you can kind of like be open, it's accessible and it's welcoming. And if you stumble across Nardwuar speaking of some rap artists you might not have, you know, heard from, and again, I think that would, it's definitely helped because there's an enormous amount of historically and currently of narrative. And you mentioned before, you know, about the idea that the record companies, as we would say, you know, dumb down the genre, right? Because they don't want that messaging to get out. And there's actually been some discussion about how purposeful that is. There's a big controversy in hip hop that's been around for many, many years that they dumbed down they purposely made the genre more violent and more criminalistic because the same companies that own the record labels own the private prisons. What we could do is if we can influence the young people to be violent and we can fill the prisons. Whether that's 100% true or not, whether there was some meeting where they all kind of, you know, decided this, or it's just an unfortunate byproduct. I think any art form is going to eventually pander to the least common denominator, right? It's why we go to movies and we see shoot 'em ups and we see superhero movies. We don't see art house films and documentaries. Like, it's just the more people are going to be drawn to, Peaky Blinders than National Geographic. So so hip hop's going to go that route too. So whether it's purposeful or it's just like the way capitalism does art, you know, I don't know. But the problem is that you can still turn on a documentary. You can still go to a ballet. You know, you can still go to an art house film because people fund that stuff because people recognize that there's a cultural importance to making sure that those things don't get buried and go away. And so I don't think hip hop has gotten to that point yet. But I think that every Nardwuar, humbly, every hip hop can save America where, you know, I get a chance to be in front of people that aren't from this neck of the cultural woods and say, no, there's so much, there's a lot of beauty and brilliance here. And it'd be cool if, like, I don't know, depends on what you do. Y'all are podcasts. I don't even know what you're doing, you know, when you're not doing this, but you were like, I'm going to give you a platform to talk about it. Fantastic. Maybe you're a school board member and you're like, wait a minute, tell me more about hip hop and education. Is that a real thing? Can we, and I'm, you know, because we have a lot of underprivileged kids. And I'm like, I don't care if you got privileged kids. It's going to make everybody have fun in school. Black, white, across the board. Everyone loves hip hop. It's America. We have tried and true techniques that'll make these kids just be more engaged and happy about being in school. Like, don't you want that? Or if you're a community organizer or you work in a car dealership and you just want to get, you know, more customers, I could be like, yeah, maybe you should just be more connected to your communities in a way that they'll, you know, respect that you're talking their language. Who knows? Whatever it is, I'm saying that all this exists. So for every Nardwuar that can push back against the narrative, I'll just say this. I cringe every time it's like, you know, local rapper arrested for blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and then you look it up and it's like, it's a kid who has like some songs on YouTube. And I'm like, he's not a rapper. Until you put rapper on your tax return, you're not a rapper. Like, but you know, right. But to them, to the news, he's a rapper, you know, he's also a high school student. How come you didn't lead with that? You know what I mean? Like, because, you know, so there's
a euphemism for black.
Of course. It's a euphemism for, you know, for violent black, you know, criminal. And it's the othering. It's all part of the whole, you know, thing that's happening. But for every one that can do something to oppose that, I'm off. So I think I never thought of Nardwuar as doing that, but absolutely 100%. I mean, obviously, yes, when you say it like that, 100%. And it's really great that exists for some people because they just need to see it. Most people aren't bad. Most people, I don't say most people, but like most people are being told this horrible narrative about, you know, the hip hop and by extension, those associated with it. And I mean, this is the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. And I've been around brilliant people, like really brilliant people. I've talked at Harvard. My dad was the smartest person I've ever met in my life. Some of the most brilliant people I ever met in my life are freestyle rappers that I used to see in New York City at a show called Freestyle Mondays, which, you know, doesn't happen anymore, but went on for about almost 20 years. And I'll just tell you about this real quick. This is Freestyle Monday. It used to be a weekly show where you just kind of freestyle on the mic and kind of, you know, practice your craft, right? But once a month, they'd have an MC challenge. And you'd have 8 competitors that sign up rap battle, right? But when I say freestyle, I mean off the top of the head, impromptu. Right. So it's people just rapping while you're clapping. I just be yapping. I'm saying it right now. We're on the podcast and app and you know what I mean? Whatever. They did it. I didn't do it. They're better than me. But that kind of thing.
That worked. I was okay with that.
Right. I'm rusty. And so, okay. So competitor A, competitor B, right? All right. Flip a coin, heads, tails. All right. You go, you win the course. You want to go first or second? Okay, cool. Right. There's a wheel. You spin a wheel. It's like a game show wheel. Right. And it's categories and it's, news, current events, science, hip hop, food chain. Right. You spin the wheel. And so whatever it lands on. Okay. Lands on food chain. All right. Rapper A, you're a shark. Rapper B, you're plankton. Go.
Wow.
Got it.
And they have to rap about from the perspective of a shark. Hey, I'm the shark. I'm all up in the ocean. I keep going. Steady motion. Whatever. They did it. I didn't do it. And the other plankton, the whole sea relies on me. Whatever. But mind you, live band the whole time. Some of the finest musicians in the land. Live band rocking the whole time. Beautiful. Wow. I mean, when I tell you this, to this day, I say it in the book. I say it's shouts to ill-spoken Corey James, who was the host of this and led it for many, many years. Shouts to Mariella, who was the co-host and such. DJ Milk Money also had a DJ, and that was like kind of the crew for many, many years. It was some of the best like entertainment by human beings I've ever seen in my life. And I'm a rap fan, so I get it. But I guarantee, I used to bring people there or send people there. But I guarantee you don't have to be a rap fan. You're gonna. It's brilliant. These folks are so brilliant because you have to know a lot of things because you don't know what could come up. And so you have to be great at freestyle rapping. You have to have the charisma and the charm and the cleverness to say something that's clever because then you get judged who won that round. And then, it goes through the night and then you have a champion. And you have to, like you say, you have to have this like kind of worldly knowledge. And when I started talking to them, I'm like, yo, bro, like, not for nothing, but you're really smart. Like, what do you do? Like, who are you? And he'd be like, well, I'm a school teacher. I teach, or,
Wow.
or I'm an executive. I work in advertising and, or I'm, whatever, but they're smart people. And so I start asking them, do you ever bring like your ability to rap like into the classroom? And he's like, oh yeah, all the time. Or I work with I go to Rikers Island every weekend. Mikhail Amin, who's in my book, he goes, I go to Rikers Island, and I do this program with young men who are locked up, and we do rap workshops, try to help them, express themselves and just be better about, communicating, and so that when they get out, they're a little bit more. And I said, okay, shoot, hip hop might be able to save America, according to y'all. And that's kind of where this came from. So I sunsetted like the covering these events. And I went in this direction because I met the smartest people I'd ever met in my life, freestyle rapping at a club in Manhattan.
Man,
So-
that is beautiful.
I'm inspired. I think your premise is on point for sure. And no one else is coming to save us. So
Definitely not.
We
might as well
are
save
our own.
ourselves,
Not until Disclosure Day.
right? Which I guess comes out next week or whatever.
Yeah, I think we'll see. Yeah.
But there's one category here that I'm particularly fond of because I've been exposed to a level of talent in it that I didn't realize the depth of. And I want to just bring it in. It's sort of a left turn here. So for those of you who are feeling real high off this, and this is going to be a little bit of a like, okay, this is like the salad with the steak. What are some of the most powerful experiences you've had, and who are the people that have really impressed you with the art of beatboxing, and what are the subtleties about it that people might miss?
I love that you bring this up. Man, there's so many advocates of beatboxing that just love when it's brought up because it's oft forgotten. Beatboxing. I mean, there's an argument to be made. I know that my good friend DJ D Wiz, who worked with Dougie Fresh for many, many years, there's the argument to be made that beatboxing should be considered an official element, just like emceeing, DJing and such. So it's very highly regarded amongst hip hop practitioners. Beatboxing has been. There's a documentary called American Beatboxer that was produced by my another colleague of mine named Chesney Snow, who, depending on when this comes out, will have just been on my show. Chesney Snow ran the American Beatbox Championships for many, many years. There's still an American Beatbox Championships. There's like a league of beatboxers. American Beatbox is a good documentary to see how far the art form has come. it's an international art form. Like there's people all across the world that continue doing beatbox, making the music with their mouth, to the point where if you have only a cursory knowledge of beatboxing and you listen to some of the stuff that you would think it's AI, man. You would think that somehow they got a computer in their mouth and Chat GPT is in, embedded in them somehow. The sounds, the cadences, the complexities, the performance. Like I've seen beatbox battles, which are like they're telling a story through beatboxing, and and obviously making that competitive, but also entertaining in some way. I was just at the Trinity International Hip Hop Festival, which is yearly. Well, not yearly, mostly yearly. They just celebrated their 20th. There were a couple of years they took off COVID and all that. And that's at Hartford College in Hartford, Connecticut. Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. And they've done it for a long time. And I keynoted there and did some things, and it was great. And they had a beatbox exhibition, and it was like some of the best beatboxers in the world. And it was so entertaining and advanced and fun. And it's like, I don't know, man, if you could pay attention, at least in my newsletter and in the work I do, I try to put out whenever these things happen, to some, like when I'll list the American Beatbox Championships. You don't hear a lot about these things, just like you don't hear a lot about breaking stuff until you see it on the Olympics, which was mostly all right.
So, I have a question for you. Wait, because
except for that.
Wait. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
I saw on your TED Talk a little bit of a shot across the bow there.
Yeah.
And I saw in interviews, like I didn't see her actually speak about her performance, but others were saying that there was culture in her dance, that it was attempting to emulate. So here's what I'm wondering, with your level of education and experience, do you think that it is possible there truly was some artistry to what was performed?
Well, sure, but artistry is
very subjective.
Very subjective. Yes.
Right.
I and it's an interesting story. I did look into it a little bit when it happened. I wrote a piece about it on my Substack, basically imploring everyone in the world to not like remember it for that, because there was a lot of actual, really good artistry on display. And also, if you really want to see great beatboxing, great breaking, you don't have to wait till the Olympics. It's not even going to come back. But like, there's a freestyle session, which has, especially in the US, there's like regional tournaments, throughout the year.
Red Bull,
100%. So you can see this. Like, this shouldn't have been, if this was the first time in 20 years you saw breaking and you are complaining about it, that's your fault. You know what I mean? You don't have a right to complain. Was there artistry? No, I think she just was over her head and decided to do something that, seemed artistic, and seemed to be, I don't know, good natured, but obviously was ill-conceived and just came off as sort of a mockery to it. She got there in the first place just through a confluence of interesting regional qualifiers, and it's not that she shouldn't have been there because she went through the channels, but she shouldn't have been there. And there were some people who were saying that because, for example, and I wish I had interviewed them because I'd gotten wind of it and I reached out to them and had some back and forth. But long story short, not everyone can afford to go to the city where the regional qualifiers is. You know what I mean? And there maybe from the indigenous communities out there or whatever the case may be. And so it just wasn't a proper representation. And then on top of that, it wasn't the proper representation. So, yeah.
And we leave it at that.
Yeah. So... But but to those 2 points, those two elements are very much overlooked and forgotten. And I had she passed away last year, but I had a family member of mine who was like late 70s, no connection to hip hop, white lady, didn't know nothing about nothing. And I would talk to her about these things. She was like my training ground for like, how can I talk to people who know nothing about this, and try to I remember saying something about rap, and she was like, why would I want music in the schools that just talk about hitting people over the head with hammers? And I'm like, I understand like That's oddly specific. Have you been? What song did you hear? Like that's just like you say, violent or drugs or misogyny. Yes, of course. But that was pretty specific. Like, what one song did someone play you? Anyway,
and then like ask her, do you like the Beatles? They wrote a song called Maxwell Silverhammer, which is all about beating somebody over the head with a hammer. Like,
I wish I had made that connection at the time. Oh man, now I have it though. It's in my pocket. I'm gonna use that. But she said one time she was like, "Well, I used to like the break dancing. That was fun." And it let me know that people think past tense, that it doesn't exist anymore, right? And again, even those in hip hop, we're very jaded because of the, over commercialization of it. Even we don't think that it exists anymore. And then when you see that, especially some purists and some, real, old school minded heads in here, especially some black folks and Hispanic folk who helps start and incubate that scene. It was like, this is what happens when we don't gatekeep it. We let the world take our culture. And I get that, but that is not representative of where the evolution of the sport, if you want to call it a sport, or evolution of the art form has gone. So yes, if you liked break dancing once, please pay attention to my friends at Freestyle Session, Red Bulls, all over internet. And beatboxing, absolutely. Just look it up. Look up my man, Chris Celiz, Celiz, Celiz. And there's a couple other great beatboxers, Kayla. But yeah, just look them up and then go down that rabbit hole.
We have to mention a friend of the show, Mr. who is an amazing beatboxer. He's formerly known as MC Radioactive from the Michael Franti and so Mr.
Let's
is
go.
a friend of the show, and he's one of the dopest beatboxers ever. In fact, he does bass lines while he beatbox, which to me seems unusual, but I'm guessing isn't that unusual in the genre, in the art form.
Nope, that happens. That's to the extent to how well one can do one. Can I also shout somebody out? A good friend of my show and my ecosystem is Andrew Wang. Andrew is a music educator in White Plains, in Westchester, in New York. Good friend of the show, and he's been recently he's neurodivergent, and he readily talks about his neurodivergence. But he's also a music teacher, and now he's teaching other neurodivergent kids, in a school in Westchester, which is amazing work. And he talks about, I've interviewed him as well, and he talks about how beatboxing got him, first of all, got him into hip hop, but also beatboxing became his method of self-regulation and and artistic expression, and got him to be more comfortable in front of people, and his social anxiety through beatboxing. And he talks about that now as now he's starting to present research and do some work with neurodivergence and hip hop with beatboxing at the core. Yeah. So yeah,
you don't have to sit cross-legged and say Om to do breath work.
Absolutely.
Like the level of breath work and meditation that a beatboxer has is supreme.
Yep, 100%.
Like that, the zone they get into, man.
Yeah, and he talks about that as being like meditative and like I said, self-regulating and emotional regulation. It's amazing. And you know what? A lot of hip hop does that. And that's why I love. I remember I used to make beats. I was a producer, and I can say used to because I really don't do that anymore. I still DJ, but I don't really produce as much as I did. But for a time, that was my bag. I was making beats. I was making remixes. You can still look up Manny Faces remixes. I have a Bandcamp release some years ago, but that was my thing. It was just I would do it, and I would just that I'd get in my zone, right, and that would be it. And then one time I had a breakup, and I don't remember whatever happened. I was kind of super depressed. I didn't want to do anything. I was kind of chilling, and my brother was over, and my mother was downstairs. And at one point, a few days later, whatever it was, you could hear, because it thumps through the house. You could hear the bass drum, boom, 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 like coming throughout the house. And my mom looks at my brother, was like, he's coming back.
Yeah.
He's coming back. And I was like, oh shit, like she told me that later. I was like, yeah, I was. I said, I get back in and then my music and it started making me feel good and started making me get back into my, who I was. And so whether you're a rapper, whether you're a beatboxer, and the great thing about hip hop is that you don't need any equipment to rap, to write rhymes, to beatbox. You just need your mouth. You just need to dance. You don't need anything to DJ and stuff. Production, yeah, sure, but the bar is lowered so much these days. You got good software on a computer that's free, and you can make stuff happen. Dr. Elliot Gann does a whole program. He goes around the world, therapeutic beat making. It's a whole program. He's funded. He goes all over the world, every country in the world. He's been to like 50 countries. Ridiculous. And he's a psychologist. He's one of them smart brain dudes.
Got it. Is that a technical term? No.
Yeah, smart brain. Yeah.
So when
That's
people
what a smart brain.
Smart brain. Yeah, smart brain guy.
So when people finish this episode and go back into their ordinary lives, what's one thing you hope they start seeing differently?
The ultimate ask, which is a lot because it's not everyone can do this, but they can actually, hey, I'm available. Reach out to me and maybe I could help you figure it out. I want to. The ultimate ask in an ideal world, certainly they'll start to look at hip hop, obviously as bigger than what they hopefully or probably came in with, right? But the real goal here is how can you take this back to what you do, in your real life? And like I gave some examples, like, oh, maybe you're on a school board, and you're like, well, I'm interested in educational thing. I never heard about hip hop education. Like it's a whole thing. There's a minor at Howard University in hip hop studies. There's people teaching it at Rutgers Graduate School of Education. My friend Lauren Kelly, like Rutgers, Harvard, the Peabody Observatory at Johns Hopkins, Ohio State University, all teaching hip hop as a pedagogical tool, or hip hop as a way to intersect with education. So maybe that's your lane. Maybe you're a teacher and you've never heard of this. Maybe you're an educator, someone on the school board. Maybe you work in the city office and your municipality, and you go to your mayor and be like, hey, our education department doesn't know about this. Or, your mental health, your health department doesn't know about these things. And you'll say, I heard about this from this guy, Manny. I don't know a lot about it. I'll hire him. This would be great. If you hire him to come and consult with you, that'd be fantastic. But just to think about this as you go through your life and say, ooh, there's something that we can improve here. There's a problem here. Matter of fact, come to me and say, well, we have a ecological problem here because the waterways are all clear. How can hip hop help the waterways? Right?
And Manny has an answer.
I will have an answer. We'll find a way, because some of it is just an idea of how do we engage the community? How do we engage with people across different, interests and maybe ideologies, and bring them all together in that cipher? And how do we? And so there's actually a big organization called Hip Hop is Green, that focuses on ecological issues. Hip hop can save America, and that's just not in any one particular thing, but just the mentality of we know how to bring people together, in ways that, and again, globally, but in community, in ways that I challenge you. Nothing else can do it. It's not sports, because it's go Knicks, baby. If you ain't Knicks team, if you ain't Knicks tapes, then we're done. But it's not politics, and it's not religion.
Right.
Like the one thing that I've seen, and I challenge anyone, I'm sure you have niches, right? You have, you have car culture. You have where you can get people together, moped culture, right? Where you get people across different communities and they all come to you. Pickleball, man, I've seen all kind of people playing pickleball together. But pickleball ain't helping the kids in third grade. You know what I mean? And the only thing that I've seen that across the board, across all those demographics and borders and boundaries that you've mentioned and thought about today, the only thing that I've seen that literally brings people together. And again, maybe you're not 100% invested. Maybe you walk out of that cipher and you're still a jerk, or you're still, have implicit biases, it happens. But the only place that for that moment, y'all are all equal on equal playing field, equally respecting each other's thing, is when you're in this hip hop world. So I'm trying to tap into that. And so I do welcome anyone listening to go outside in the world and see where what they do might be able to be improved through what I'm talking about. And where it can't, I'd love to be challenged to help find a way to do that.
Well, it also occurs to me that just the remix culture itself, like thinking of medicine, how you could take high-end academic Western medicine and incorporate earthy, ancient medicinal practices and come up with healing.
That's where I think, that's where I think the magic is in the alchemy. Hip hop is a practice of alchemy, as my guy Marlon Richardson, his name is Unlearn the World, and he has a great organization in California called Hip Hop for Change, works with youth and does a lot of great programming with schools. It's alchemy, and that's where the magic happens, in these unholy alliances, which is what created hip-hop.
They're extra holy. They're more holy.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm going to use that. Extra holy. I'm going to borrow that. And I will cite you when I do, just like I cited all my friends today. And I hope that if anyone of those avenues that I talked about or touched upon, like, come to me for the macro level, I don't know, holistic view, but also go down the rabbit holes of anybody I talk to and find more. They're all
so
amazing.
you're inviting people to get a hold of you. Just run the numbers right now. Like, what's the best way to actually like connect to you immediately if they're listening right now?
Yeah, I mean, I like to point to hiphopcansaveamerica.com. It's sort of a hub. It's where the podcast lives. It's where the YouTube channel can be linked off to. It's where I have a great Substack. It's free. I give a lot of this kind of insight and knowledge. That's free. Sign up for the newsletter. Y'all could do all those things. The newsletter is probably the best thing to do because then you get hit with some stuff.
That's them reading you. I'm like, they're calling you right now because they want to do a thing with you. Is there an email?
Yeah, you can mannyfaces.com and there's a contact form right there. So yeah, you can connect to me, Manny at mannyfaces.com. Google me, DM me on Instagram, whatever. I'm open to everything. So yeah, whatever mode of communication you like, telephone, text, website, contact form, email, or telepathy. I agree. Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
They probably won't do that. So the other ones are better. You're right.
Well, after everything gets revealed through Steven Spielberg's movie coming up next week, we might see a lot more telepathy.
Never know.
But we're at the point now in the broadcast where we wrap it up, and we have a question that we ask everybody that's on the show.
All right.
We love this question because the answers are so diverse. And it's just a joy for us to experience. And I'll just be vulnerable right now. Based on this conversation, I'm already feeling a lot of unease, a little bit of insecurity about asking it. But we do this despite the feeling of vulnerability. So, Greg, if you would.
Yeah, for some reason, Marc has things about questions. Anyway, so here's our final question, Manny.
Okay.
Eminem or Foo Fighters?
Oh. Good God. I mean, what's the criteria we're talking about here? Who I like better or just?
Yeah, it's your question. You answer
do whatever you want with it.
I like them both. I'm actually I don't say a fan. I respect and enjoy and put Eminem pretty high in the
the lexicon.
Yeah, that's I guess the word I was looking for. Of hip hop history. I think just a brilliant wordsmith. I give him a lot of props. I'm more of a fan of rap than I am of not rap, so I would lean Eminem over Foo Fighters. But shouts to the Foo Fighters. Aren't they doing a thing? Didn't they just do a thing? They're
starting a tour again. I think their new album's coming out.
I know some things.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they're dope. But Eminem's, if given that choice, I'm gonna, if I'm on a desert island and I have to, listen to one, I'm gonna listen to Eminem. Eminem's not in my top 5 that are alive though, but he's up there. He's still my guy. So shouts to Eminem.
All right.
I dissed Eminem. No, fun fact, I actually did a diss track against Eminem one year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on some white.
That's dangerous.
White violence. Yeah, I did.
Jesus,
it never got to him. I don't never heard. I was nobody, but it did get played on Hot 97 in New York City, and yeah, so it was funny. It was a good little diss track.
Well, maybe
you're on a list, Manny.
I know. I'm glad he didn't see it. It's fine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your commitment to culture and to humanity and the belief that something great can happen for all of us. It's hard to come by that sometimes, that optimism, that throughput, that joyful exploration of what can we do to make things better. It has been a true honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Honor's all mine. I appreciate your platform. I appreciate you having some time for me and just, taking what I do seriously. That means a lot to me. So thank you.
Recording stopped.